If you go back to 1994, Congressman Pence, there was the contract with America. And one of the big issues, if you go back even to interviews I've done with Republican leaders till after the election of President Obama, was that this wanted to be the party of new ideas.
Right.
And in fact, this pledge has been criticized for being anything but new. Where satire is most effective. Jon Stewart on The Daily Show this week raised this issue by comparing some of what was said in 1998 by who wants to be Speaker Boehner, John Boehner, to what he said in unveiling the pledge. And this is what it looked like.
A smaller, less costly, and more accountable government in our nation's capital.
I don't know what to say. This thing's not even a sequel. It's like a shot-by-shot remake of your... I thought the pledge was you were humbled and going to come back with fresh new ideas. Wasn't that the pledge?
So what's new here?
Well, ending bailouts and cutting spending in Washington, D.C. is a new idea, David. And the truth is, look, Republicans didn't just lose our majority in 2006. We lost our way. We walked away from the principles of fiscal discipline and reform that minted our governing majority back in 1980 and again in 1994, and the American people walked away from us. What we have in this proposal is not necessarily new. The idea of fiscal responsibility, pro-growth policies, openness and transparency in government are solid American ideas. What Republicans are committing to in this pledge to America is taking important first steps in this Congress to steer our national government back to those basic practices.
Congressman Van Hollen, do you agree? Is this a return to core principles, or is this a rehash?
Look, this is a rehash. It's a recycling of the Bush economic agenda. They put a new front page on it, but otherwise this is a Xerox copy. Their whole answer to everything seems to be give the folks at the very top a tax break, and then they want to undo the regulations and reforms on Wall Street. I mean, the problems on Wall Street led to catastrophe around the country. Millions of people lost their jobs, and they're trying to do what lobbyists tried very hard to do but didn't succeed, which is to say, let's put those guys back in charge. And it is a return to the Bush economic agenda. There's no doubt about it. I would
let me follow up on this point.
This is not
Congressman Pence, hold on. Let me follow up on this point, which is where you think this is a credible economic argument. You voted against TARP. You opposed the stimulus, as did other Republican leaders. And yet economists who have looked at this from both sides of the aisle, Robert Samuelson, writing in Newsweek, who is a more conservative columnist on economic matters, says that the aggressive actions taken going back to TARP and then followed through by this administration most definitely had an impact on GDP, on the fact that we don't see unemployment approaching 16%. Is it credible for Republicans to ask for the vote this November when effectively you would have let the financial system teeter off the edge of a cliff?
Well, look, Republicans weren't prepared to let the financial system teeter off a cliff.
Well, you voted against TARP.
We just thought taking $700
What would have happened if you had not passed TARP?
David, we just thought taking $700 billion from Main Street and transferring it to Wall
That's
Street
good
was
rhetoric,
a profoundly
but what would have happened to the
idea.
financial system?
No,
Who in the financial system thinks it didn't stabilize the system?
Republicans had a proposal. It was a backstop, not a handout. We could have worked out this, as a lot of the postmortem analysis suggests that we could. Look, this is not a choice between the failed economic policies of the present and the failed economic policies of the past. I know that the Democrats want to frame it that way. What Republicans are saying is we have to get back. We have to end the era of borrowing and spending and bailouts and government takeovers. We have to repeal Obamacare lock, stock, and barrel, oppose their cap and trade schemes, and then we got to get back to the practice of fiscal responsibility and the kind of policies that will get this economy growing again.
Name me one painful choice on spending that Republicans are prepared to make, that there could be some real blowback for politically, that they'll stand by if they want to reduce the deficit and rein in spending.
Well, look, I
read through this. I want to know, where's the painful choice that you're prepared to make on spending?
I never thought you asked. Look, cutting discretionary spending.
On what?
Down to pre-stimulus, pre-bailout level. Look, we could reduce government employment back down to 2008 levels. That's $35 billion over 10. We could eliminate government programs like the Save America Treasures programs. That's $300 million.
What about entitlement spending? Are you going to raise the retirement age, as John Boehner suggests might be a good idea on Social Security?
Well, and the last time I was on this program, I told you we keep our promises to seniors and near seniors, but for Americans under the age of 40, we absolutely have to begin to reform Medicare and Social Security in ways that will ensure its long-term fiscal solvency. But let me assure you, the Pledge to America is not the end-all, be-all. It's meant to be a good start.
All right, Congressman Ann Holland, what about President Clinton, who said this week on MSNBC, perhaps the Democrats need a pledge of their own. They need a card with 3 or 5 of the top points that they're going to campaign on. What would those be for Democrats in the fall, and do you take his advice?
Well, the Democrats have set out what their plans are. We're going to continue, as the president has said, to focus on providing relief to small business going forward. We have a bill coming to the floor of the House this week that I hope Mike Pence and his colleagues will join us on to try and make sure that we are not put at a competitive disadvantage by the Chinese currency manipulation. We're going to continue to focus on clean energy jobs and incentives for clean energy, and we're going to continue to focus on the economy. And I have to say, when you look at the Republican so-called pledge, you find a lot of phony numbers. Let me give you an example. They say they're going to save $16 billion by getting rid of TARP. Mike, we voted to get rid of TARP already. It was part of the Wall Street reform bill that Republicans opposed. That bill terminated TARP, and yet in this pledge they're pretending they're going to find savings from shutting down something that we've already shut down. That's the kind of thing I think people are tired of. Earmarks. They made all this talk about how they were going to end earmarks. We reformed the earmark process. We said no more earmarks that distort the private market by going to for-profit private entities. There's not a word in there about that. I assume that they're going to go back to their old ways when they quadrupled earmarks. It's hard to take seriously given their record here, and it is the same old, same old.
Look, different from the Democrats, we Republicans refuse to request any earmarks this year whatsoever. We've imposed a self-imposed moratorium on earmarks, and we're going to end earmarking as we know it if we have a chance to leave the country.